For starters, thank you very much for this opportunity of inviting me to share my experience of pitching on the global stage, but also at the national level, but in general, sharing what it's like to pitch and what exactly you need to be ready for a global stage pitch or an international pitch. It was an amazing opportunity. My journey to getting to South Africa was, I would say, just to say the very least, very surprising, very emotional, very inspiring for myself and the rest of my team. Because I think on the day of the pitching competition, when I was arriving to where we had the pitching competition at Africana, it was raining. I think that very day, I happened to get drenched by the rain on that day as I was coming for the pitch. So I had my trench coat in. I think the first thing I did when I got into the venue was go down to the toilets and first like try to dry myself up, clean my shoes. It was, I would say, sort of like the worst start to a day, and I honestly didn't expect much from it. But I think what I just remember that day was like, honestly, most of the things weren't going great. My pitch at the time of pitching, because we were supposed to send in our pitch decks earlier, so I sent in my deck, PDF, and then when it was being converted to be presented, it was converted to PowerPoint, and then some things were just not showing. But what I did that day and what I was doing while we were waiting to pitch is I had gotten my pitch at the back of my head, right? I'd gotten my pitch at the back of my head, so I wasn't reading off the slides as they were presenting. And I think that's what really saved me that very day, because honestly, my pitch deck wasn't showing as great, but I had mastered and I had understood what exactly I was talking about because I'd done it over and over. So it sort of saved me from the embarrassment of freezing. It saved me from the embarrassment of not knowing what I was talking about. And we're going to talk about that in a moment as we go through this. But before I dive into that, I just wanted to give you all a snippet of the pitch that I did in South Africa. And then I'll have a conversation about how we got there, how I prepared to do that, and a couple of extra learnings that I have myself. Because when we were in South Africa, we were 15 companies that were selected to pitch. And then from that 15, there was a selection of the next group that was going to pitch for the finals at the same stage the following day. So the very first day we pitched, I got selected amongst the top startups that were then going to pitch at the finals. And then on the final day, we were meant to pitch. And then I'm going to share with you that final pitch that we had. So if you allow me to just share my screen. Yes, here it is. So I'll just share this part of my screen. And I hope the sound is on when I'm playing. Oh, let me first make sure I select that, because I think it will be easier to speak about something. Yeah, there we go. Share sound, optimize for video. So going to be starting this now.
Or even the person interviewing is just not technically skilled to do it. And I know this because over the past 7 years, while working at companies like Andela, GeekStart, and LD Talent, we've interviewed thousands of candidates and also run over thousands of resumes. And with that, my team got to understand the three key problems that also exist within hiring, right? It's either that you're losing time and money by having your professionals run these interviews at an early stage rather than putting that time in the business, or you sometimes do not have the expertise within your team to interview for a new role, or sometimes it's just too many choices at the start of the pool that you're still losing time to find the right hire. Right? And that's why we came up with a solution that automates 90% of that process. We give you the power to just post a job, receive applicants, get those applicants screens, get those applicants run through interviews, and then focus on doing the 10%. So we do not remove the human component. We still believe that that 10% that handles the culture and understanding of your top candidates is what you should focus on, rather than the multitudes of applicants that you have. And we do this by using two things. Luffy and Yori. Luffy is that resume friend you always reach out to, or I want to hire someone. and Dory is the expert at interviews and assessments. Luffy simply just handles the free text. You type in what you're looking for. Oh, I'm looking to hire a React developer. Oh, I'm looking to hire a salesperson. And instantly you get results either from your existing pool or from a pool that we have curated. Now, on the other hand, Dory is your expert system to run these interviews. Dory has behavioral and technical interviews set up, and then she also goes ahead to allow you to choose from avatars based on a specific role. So the same way I'm talking to you right now is the same way these avatars will run the interview, and the best part is they do the assessment, the scoring, and you focus on who's the best of all these people to talk to. And we run a simple business model, right? We run subscription for customers who use Dory, and they pay an annual subscription. And those that choose to use Luffy for just the resumes pay per resume, so they still value for them. And the subscription models are set up that way. The resume model is based on a candidate. Within launching the past month, we've grown from 0 customers to 15 customers and generated $2,000 in revenue. And that is expected to grow once we complete our race. But before we get to that, the competitors that we have to age and advance. And those are some of the ones that we talked about. And with this race, we're able to advance the product, build out Luffy, and attain more customers to get us to $45,000 in revenue monthly. Thank you.
That was the pitch that we got to do that day. There are a couple of things that I'm going to share about that maybe could have been better. There are a couple of things that I feel went really well. But at the end of it all, I think what I'm going to say is that a lot of the preparation that gets you here is actually doing it over and over again and practice, right? I had to go over this speech multiple times and iron out a couple of things. But beyond the pitch, I mean, a couple of other things that were very, very interesting to have while at the pitching competition was having the support of the Ugandan team. They're cheering me on. This was very refreshing. Sometimes you may not get that support. You may not have folks around to cheer you on, but you also still need to make it out in some sort of way. But in this case, I was glad and happy to have the Ugandan delegation around to cheer me on. So it's amounted to just giving you that much more strength and belief in what you're able to do. So in most cases, if you're able to get someone, if you're able to either even just make friends, even if it's not the Ugandan delegation, because you need that rapport, you need that support as you're getting onto the stage, because it can be scary, it can be daunting, but just having an extra person out there in the audience that you can look at, that you can give that glance at, and they're like, oh, cheering you on, is always super helpful. So that was amazing for me. And then beyond the Ugandan delegation, I also got to experience a bunch of things. This was more of a surprise, but I guess while we're in South Africa, the City, which is the team I support, Manchester City, happened to have the trophy tour happening. So I was so glad, and it was so coincidental that I then got to actually go and like experience and get close to all the trophies that Manchester City won, the Champions League, the Premier League, and all these others. Took a picture with the team, which was a super amazing experience. But last of all, I also got to share the Ugandan experience with some of the people in South Africa. And as you'll see in the middle right there is a bottle of UG, which I went with, shared with a bunch of my friends in Cape Town when we were hanging out right after the pitching events. And these are some of the moments. These are some of the friends, again, that made the whole pitching experience a whole lot better, a whole lot easier. And it just goes to say that sometimes some of these people now actually became sort of like business partners because of the interaction that we had with them, even outside of the pitching competition itself. So that's more about my experience. Now, to share briefly about how exactly do you get yourself ready to pitch on an international stage, and how do you put yourself in a position where you're most likely to succeed or most likely to run through the different stages. I'm briefly going to share a link to a platform called DocSend, which is, I guess, the biggest platform for sharing pitch decks across the world. And it has a lot of data on how exactly to structure your pitch decks. And because we have very minimal time, I'm not exactly going to dive into what that entails, but I'll just leave this link here that shares that information, because it's an entire blog that covers what your deck is supposed to have and what the most recent trends when it comes to investors, when it comes to angels, look for when looking in a deck. And you'll find that this has kept evolving over the years. More recently, there is less attention being given to the competitor deck and more attention to the financials, more attention to the traction, more attention to the unit economics, because these are things that are becoming more relevant as we progress, right? Investors are becoming more particular about the numbers and about how feasible is your business when it comes to the numbers. Now, beyond just what goes into your deck, these are some of the things that I took while preparing for the pitching competition. One, always prepare way before time. If possible, a month, a couple of weeks in advance. Get your deck ready, run over that deck. The one thing that I took to mind while preparing for the South Africa competition, and this also came from the fact that I needed to know the deck by heart so that I am not reading off a screen. And as you'll notice during the pitch, most of the times I was just pacing around, but I had the deck at heart. I had the deck in my mind. And each time I would speak about something, the slide would move, but it would correlate with what I'm talking about. And that happened because I practiced that deck over and over. My goal initially was to do it 180 times in front of the mirror. And this is a figure that I got from Vusi, who is one of the best orators in the country. But basically always have at the back of your mind, if you can prepare and practice that deck 180 times in front of the mirror, then by the time you go to the pitch competition, you're going to be superb. Because while you're doing that, you're also going to be ironing out, figuring out what feelers you're putting in, figuring out what feelers to remove, figuring out what words you need to change. You time yourself and make sure that you remain within the time that you're allocated. In our case, I believe we were given about 3 minutes. So in that time over practicing 180 times, you're then getting yourself mentally ready, but you're also preparing and like sort of making it second nature that you're saying these things, right? So that when you get on the final day, all you're doing is just re-echoing. It sort of reminds you of like when we were in primary or nursery or high school and you had plays and you had poems that you had to do. You had to have those by heart and you had to cram them. So if it means sort of cramming your day, cram it. But when I say cram, I don't mean go on the podium and say word for word what's in the slide. That's another thing that you need to avoid, right? Because what's on the slide is most likely going to be seen and read by the judges. What you want to talk about are the extra things that you have not included on the slide, right? You want to give the explanations that could not have been fit in the slides, because the decks are usually supposed to be minimal, very few words, more visual sometimes. So use more, I would say, exemplifying or simpler words to sort of describe what's on the deck. And in this case, if it's a solution slide, do not say word for word what's on the solution slide. Talk about how different it is, how you arrive at that pace. If it's the team slide, why is your team set up to be successful? And I'm sure Anthony Natif is going to talk more about a bunch of these things in his presentation about fundraising. But yeah, really, as you're pitching, it's about creating a character. It's about creating charisma. It's about owning and knowing that story, right? Which brings me back to the next thing. Always make sure that as you're sharing this pitch, you either try to make it personal in that the problem is personal to you, which is good. But again, there are limits when it comes to personal. Do not go over the edge and say, oh, something that's over exaggerated. You need to make it personal enough that it feels that you are drawn to this problem and you're the right person to solve this problem. Or if it's not a personal problem to you, show expertise. Talk about how long you've been in that industry, talk about what you identified, talk about your engagements with different customers, and see how those different engagements got you in a position where you were the best person to solve and the best person to like bring this company to the stars, right? So those are some of the things that you need to take at heart. And then something that we always do, and I also find myself doing this sometimes, is rushing through the pitch, like saying 1,000 words within the 3 minutes. When you're given 3 minutes, it doesn't necessarily mean that you need to rush through everything that's given. It just means that you need to focus on the important things. And in this case, that's why I shared the link that focuses on the most important slides that are usually necessary in the deck. So the team, the problem, the solution, the market size, or even the business model itself, traction, what have you done so far? And the financials, what does it look like? What's the opportunity here? At the end of the day, and sure Natif will also talk about this again, at the end of the day, investors are people who are looking to make money. So your goal in pitching is telling the best story of how exactly them giving you money is going to transition into them making more money. It's pretty much as simple as that. The different ways of telling that story, but at the end of the day, have you conveyed a message that gives the investor assurance that, oh, if I bet on this person, I am most likely going to get my money's worth, right? So that's part of what's really needed here. And beyond that, I'd say when preparing these decks, if you can, try to get some professional help. Try to get a designer to work on the deck. If you're not able to use Canva, try to just make it as simple as possible. But let's not fill up the decks with so many words. Try to have a balance between visual and some words, right? Try to just make it as simple as possible. And with all those things, with the practice, with the attention to the story, creating a compelling story that drives and convinces someone of the business side of things, convinces them that if they make this investment, it would be good. Highlighting the problem, and then highlighting how your solution solves for that very problem, and then showing how big of an opportunity this is and why it has to be solved now, right? So these are some of the things that are going to be very important. But most importantly, you also need to prepare yourself for the questions. I didn't share the video of the questions, but you always need to get ready for answering those questions. What I usually do is I reach out to a bunch of people before I go for an international pitch or before I go for a pitch competition, and I ask them to ask me questions, right? I tell them I'm going to pitch, ask me all the questions that you can think. Sometimes we get so caught up in the fact that we understand our business or startup so much that we sort of ignore even the most trivial of things and either get it too complicated or sometimes get it in a way that it's hard to understand. So having even the most trivial of questions coming from someone who doesn't understand your business is what's usually helpful, because you get to realize what you're missing out on. And again, I can't emphasize enough, practice and preparation is really what makes a winning pitch. In my case, I had to do a lot of practice while on the plane, while in the hotel room, and it got me to a position where I was able to qualify and be amongst the top startups that were pitching at the GEC. We may not have brought the win home, but at the end of the day, we performed it very well, and we were able to support and represent the country on the global stage. And I really thank GEN for this opportunity, along with Enterprise Uganda. And that's all for me. Thank you very much.
But I want to know and get to know, what do the investors really look at? Is it the way you express your pitch, or they really look at these different segments in the pitch? Because I'm very sure, as also a public speaker trainer, that this deck entails a number of things, from an overview of the company and its mission, the specific problem the company is trying or you are trying to solve, the services, the target market, the business model, the traction, the competition, and all that. But I want to just to get to know from your experience, what exactly moved the investor or moves the investor to say, really, I want to give money to Collins. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Joshua. You can lower your hand.
They work.
Collins, do you want to respond to that?
Sure thing. Thank you very much, Joshua. That's an amazing question. I would say it's subjective in a way, but I'll also explain why that's very subjective. In that, when investors are pretty much listening to a pitch, they also have specific things they're looking out for, right? Based on the stage of the investor, based on the stage of the company. If it's a really early stage company that is pre-seed idea stage, most times the investor is going to be looking out for the team and the problem, and whether this team can solve this very problem, right? So they'll care slightly less about the traction, about the numbers, because it's very early. And at this point, sometimes as startups and businesses, we go ahead and put all these wonderful projections. 12 months, this is where we'll be. 6 months, 3 years, this is where we'll be. At an early stage or at pre-seed, very early angel investors, they're most likely not going to care much about those numbers. It's nice to have them because, again, it shows that you've prepared. But in most cases, they're looking at the team, they're looking at the problem, and whether this team is the best team around to solve that problem. And most importantly, they're also going to try to look into you as a founder. Like, do they get a sense? Do they get a sense of you and believe in you as a founder to solve this problem? So at that stage, that's what they'll look at. Once you go from early stage, this is now more from you're either finding product market fit or you've almost found product market fit. Now they start to look out for different things. Okay, cool. So beyond just the team, what does the competitive landscape look like right now? what do your numbers look like? Are you in a position where with the current numbers, if you're 100 customers, can that be scaled out to 100,000, to 1,000? Can it be repetitively scaled out? So that then comes down to the unit economics. That then comes down to the business model itself. That comes down to a lot of things that are more numbers related. And at that stage, sometimes some investors will be looking out for those numbers. They'll be looking out for the financials. They'll be looking for the unit economics. They'll be looking for how big the market is. And they'll also be trying to understand, with the current traction, have you established a pattern that you're able to scale that out? And then as you go further, growth stage, series, and a lot much bigger, then this becomes very financial and also sort of team driven, in that beyond just the financials, do you now have the capability to bring in operators, to bring in sort of like C-level people that are going to scale this out to a greater position, right? I do not have much experience in this area because, again, I have not pitched at that level, but at least based on the research and understanding, when it comes to Series A, Series B, Series C, it's very much about the numbers, about the financials that the company is running, and now less about the team, less about the business model, because at this point, you've already validated the business model, you've found product market fit. Now the question is, can you scale that out to greater heights? So pretty much different stages, different investors will look out for different things, but I hope that answers the question.
It's Collins talking about his experience with the pitch. He said, walk through the rain, but be there. Walk through the rain, but be there. He said, turn up. And to be able to turn up and then be kwara is not good. Have it in your head, have it in your heart, such that even in the worst of circumstances, when the technology doesn't work, you work. Have it in your head, have it in your heart. And be confident. Prepare. Be confident. And even the most trivial questions should be thought about beforehand. If necessary, get professional help. But as we keep saying when we are teaching farming as a business, if your mother can understand it, and your grandmother can understand it, and your daughter can understand it, then the investor will probably understand it. So thank you very much, Collins. Of course, teach yourself, reach out to websites and other spaces. For God's sake, go talk to somebody in Enterprise Uganda, get professional help, but get to do it properly. Don't take it for granted. I may not repeat everything. Kudira muluyimba, as they say. If I was to repeat the whole song, I probably will not make a good cover. But thank you very much, Collins. And I'm so glad that you also said when you go out there internationally, take the spirit of Uganda with you. If you know, you know. A network, and combine a bit of business with pleasure, with a bit of pleasure. And I have to tell you, Collins, down in Cape Town, it was a pleasure to be on your side. It was a pleasure for GEN Uganda to be part of the team that you are. And thank you for performing the way you did. Ladies and gentlemen, that's Collins. Collins referred to the pitching event at Fairway Hotel. And that was the pitching event that GEN Uganda put together, GEN, Global Entrepreneurship Network, put together. That's how we got Collins to come into this space. And then the international, the global event he went to, GEN Plus Africa, was in Cape Town. And there may be more. No, I shouldn't say there may. There will be more. But even when we should not go international, we are looking at the question of Ugandan investors putting money into Ugandan small and medium enterprises. And it becomes extremely important that entrepreneurs who are looking to expand, to grow, who are looking for financing, should see that they have taken care of the other things. Collins said nowadays the pitching deck may not focus so much on competition, for example, as on the numbers. Yes, indeed, numbers don't. So I was going on about the quality of the pitch. And it's not just the quality of the pitch, but actually the quality of everything else that comes to the pitch. The documentation. I think more and more, the entrepreneur who will find the financing to expand their business has got to be a lot more, for lack of a better word. So the entrepreneur has got to be a lot more professional. I keep saying one of the challenges we've seen in this ecosystem is that there's so many people who focus on making money rather than growing the business, regardless of what stage the business is at. So somebody starts yesterday but one. Yesterday, he has finished registering the company, or maybe he hasn't, but somehow he wins a tender to supply something. And the next day, he's taking an envelope to somebody in order that he may thank them for the first tender they won and that they may get the next tender. And everything is done in a certain way that should that particular entrepreneur not be there the day after tomorrow, then the business is not there. On the other hand, what we've heard from Collins and what we know now, what we've known for a long time, is that the entrepreneur who will grow.
And I guess to the audience, thank you very much for being such an amazing audience. Thank you for sticking here. My parting shot is going to be to believe. I think really just believe. I couldn't believe that we would come in a very worse situation for that day to pitch at Fairway Hotel, then make it as the best team. But I think at the end of the day, once you do your thing over and over, once you stick to it, once you're resilient, once you're open to feedback, and a lot of what Natif has talked about, opening yourself to other people who are smarter than you, which is one of the things I've also tried to do. And there's this thing that they say, which is always hire people who are smarter than you. And I've tried to practice that. And I think Anthony mentioned much about that. So yeah, as we go out there, the journey is hard. The journey is very filled with a lot of trials and tribulations, but as long as you persevere, as long as you stick to it, at the end of the day, the results will come out, I'm sure. So let's keep building. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Collins. Shall we have Natif, your closing remarks?
Yeah, thank you guys for having me. I really feel honored. I'm extremely impressed by, of course, I've said it earlier, by how Colin holds himself. I can't wait to look at the business he's running and hopefully grab a coffee or something with him and learn a few things. And I'm cheering for people like him who are putting their best foot forward and trying to change the narrative that, you know, East Africa is where capital comes to die. That shouldn't be the case. And conversations like this improve our chances of building companies that can last beyond the valley of death that hits any company that's scaling. So it's important you guys understand that you're doing the Lord's work. Most countries are built on SMEs, and the more of them that we churn out there, the more successful our societies will be. And you can always count on me to avail myself, create time where schedules allow, to be present, to mentor a few individuals here and there, to speak to someone, encourage someone. Look out for your mental health. You want to talk to someone, even vent, please pick my number, reach out to me. I will listen even when I don't have the solutions you want. Sometimes listening is all we want. The mental health side of entrepreneurship is one of the least talked about things, but it's really important that we pay attention to that. It's the pits, you guys, as is common speak, but you know, we have to do it, and don't hesitate to look out for help. And yeah, I'm cheering for you. Thank you, Mr. Iga. I know you're always in the trenches and stuff like this. You do a thankless job, and I feel like the country owes you a bunch of flowers. And thanks, Enterprise Uganda, for continuously putting this together. Let's keep building. Have a good one, and you take care of yourselves.
Oh, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. I hadn't heard that one. East Africa is where capital comes to die. What?
Yeah,
What
apparently
is-
50% of the capital that comes here is not returned. So
I'm very sorry.
Some investors look at it as some sort of charity to invest in East Africa. We need to give them a
Thank
reason
you.
to beg us.
Thank you, Natif. I want to dare to ask one person to give a vote of thanks. Anybody, unmute and give a vote of thanks. At this stage, Derek, is it possible to unmute everybody? And so the first one
Derek,
goes for it. Somebody give a vote of thanks. Just one person, please. Anybody? All right. Let me ask Madam Mary, are you there? I want somebody to give a vote of thanks. Ah, I see 3 hands. Let me see the 3 hands that are up. One of us, please give a vote of thanks. Ambrose, do you want to give a vote of thanks? Are your hands up by mistake? All right. I'll give the vote of thanks. Derek and the team behind the scenes, thank you very much. Madam Mary Odongo and the whole team in Gen Uganda, thank you very much. Enterprise Uganda, thank you very much for being very supportive, reliable partners. Collins and Natif, thank you very much for being our speakers today. We are supposed to go all the way from talks like this, through pitches, through mentoring, all the way to actually seeing finances being signed into businesses to grow the businesses. We're supposed to go all the way and see more people going off to the mountains in their Ferraris and keeping them going. We are supposed to see more people doing corporate social responsibility, including individual activism, backed by a solid entrepreneurship atmosphere. That's what we are all about. And so we thank everybody, every one of you, for being in this with us all. And all the best, as it is now the way to go out. God bless Uganda. Thank you very much. Thank you, team. Thank you, members, for being here. Have a good day, a good weekend.